Hello, welcome to the Powerful Dev Conference. My name is Diana Birgelbach. I'm a Microsoft MVP from Germany. I work for Orbis, where I got a chance to work with Dynamics CRM, Dynamics 365, Power Platform right from the beginning. And since the PCF were released, that's pretty much what I do all the day long. So when I talk about pro dev skills to power up the Power Apps front end, of course, I'm speaking about PCF. So what is Power Apps Component Framework? It's a framework for controls which allows us to build Power Apps, and we can include them in model-driven apps, Canvas apps, and custom pages, and even in Power Pages. It's a pro-dev way to use the same framework as the first-party controls. The PCFs are generic, and so they are reusable, and they have a great interaction with the platform. There are two types of PCFs. We have the field PCF and the dataset PCF. And when we talk about the structure of the PCF project, we will see that it includes the manifest, the resources, the features, and the implementation. But from the design point of view of the PCFs, I think the manifest is actually one of the most important because it defines all the parts which are included in the PCF. So we see the properties there, we see the resources like translation files or CSS files, and we also see the feature which are included like web API. The implementation part of the PCFs will rely on model front-end technology. That includes Node.js, TypeScript, React, and of course Fluent UI, which is a great help to make the components we create look and feel like the other ones from the Power Apps. And of course, we cannot forget about Power Platform CLI, which we'll use because that allows us to create a PCF project and also to work with the components inside the environments. So when we speak about the implementation of the control, we will take care of the main methods we see there. So we have the init method, which will be called each time a component gets instantiated. We talk about update view, which is a very important method. This one will be called each time one property will change inside the platform. So each time something changes, the update view will be called again. If you want to change a value from inside the PCF and give it outside to the platform, we are going to call the notify output change. And when that's called, the platform will call the get outputs for us, and we have the chance to provide the new values for the platform. And of course, we have the destroy method. So that would be the init, update view, get outputs, and the destroy method. We also have two types of PCF implementation which we can choose from. We can use standard components, which means that we get basically some kind of div HTML component which we can use, or we can choose the virtual component, which are in preview right now, but they offer much more possibilities because they offer us the way to use the React and Fluent UI right from the runtime. That leads to lightweight components because we don't have React inside each component. And also this improves the performance because we are included in the render process from the platform and are not separated from that. So speaking about the difference between standard and virtual component, the most important ones are inside the index.ts. So we can see that on the left side is a standard component, on the right side is a virtual component. And the main difference is the update view, because on the left side, we don't have to provide anything back. And on the right side, we have to deliver a React element. That's why this element will be taken by the platform and included in the render process. So what is a field PCF? We can bind this field components to columns. We have them on model-driven forms or on Canvas apps, on custom pages, and it supports already a lot of data types like strings, numbers, dates, choices, and choice. lookup, but they are only the simple lookup until now. And let's see, I have an example of the first PCF I've made for a field PCF is the colorful option set, which I've included on the form. And there I can use the option set by providing an icon and the colors from the customizing. So there are a few examples here, and also another example. I can provide more icons for one component. And to implement that, have a look to my GitHub project. Did you know if you press dot, you will get that opened in a Visual Studio Code-like editor. And we can see here the manifest. So I have the name, I have the display name, and the parameter. So I have the option input that's bound to option set. So this one will be offered for the option set controls. I have the input for the icon, and I have the sort by parameter where I allow to sort the options based on the value or the text. So the maker can choose that. The implementation is not very hard. Inside the update view, we have only the render control. And there I can provide the parameters which I get directly from the context from the PCF. So I have the options input with all the options available there. I have the current value. And when the user pick to change an option, I gonna call this onChange function where I save this value and call the notify output change. This one will force the platform to call for me the get outputs where I can provide a new value. I won't go in much details, but I'll show you how I can use there the Fluent UI dropdown and the icon to represent it. So basically just return that dropdown and provide the options. For the customizing point of view, I have to define the colors for each option from the option set. And after that, I can go on the form, choose the control where I want to place it, and go to components, and then add the colorful option set there. And I can provide the icon name I want to use there and the value for sorting. So that would be a simple field PCF. Now, let us talk about the second type of PCF. That would be the dataset PCF. They can be used both in model-driven apps and Canvas apps or custom pages. We can bind them on tables, on views, on subgrids, on model-driven app. And speaking in Canvas app or custom page means we can bind them to tables, collections, or custom connectors, for instance. They can represent a grid, a map, could be a calendar control, or maybe a timeline. You have to choose there. So you have the freedom to choose there. And the dataset PCF will get the data from the platform. And that's very nice. And we also have the possibilities to work with this dataset and extend it. So we can implement the paging, we can change the sorting, we can link to related tables, add some filters, add more columns. We can edit and save the changes, and we can work with a ribbon. And for that, we can choose to select a record, or we are able to retrieve the commands and even execute that commands if you want to. As an example, I show you the colorful option set grid. So this time I have the same control, but rendered as a complete grid. So you can see it here. I can use the search and the view. I can change the view if I want to. If I select a record, I can work with a ribbon. I can make some paging available. I can change the sorting. And if I want to, I can go inside a row and edit right in line. And from the customizing point of view, I'm going to go to the table where I want to define this PCF. I go to the controls and I add one. And of course, I'm going to choose the colorful option set from the list. And there I can work with this option set, that's the property set where I'm allowed to define some properties, some columns from inside the table. I can define the other properties, for instance, if it's editable or not. From the implementation, it would be hard to go now in a lot of details, but I want to show you how easy it is to implement a dataset component using the Fluent UI details list. So for that, I go to inside the update view, and the component there, it's only using details list, where I have to provide the column and the items. So inside a component, I just have to take that columns, which I get from the dataset, sort them first, and then take the display name, the width of the column, which I get from the columns. For the items, I go through sorted record IDs, and for each of them, I'm gonna get the record from the dataset records. And for each column, I can get the formatted value of that records. And that's it. And when I use now npm start watch, I can start a harness, and I already see a grid, which is very much looking like a details list from model-driven apps. Now, the colorful option set grid, it's much more complicated. There are a lot of details there. I won't go in the details there, but you can see that I'm using their details list, where I also provide in the same way the items, the columns, selection, when it's an item invoked. But the most interesting part here, when I provide the columns, I have an option to provide there a render function. This one will be called when I render this colorful option set. So I have a control only for this color. Keep this in mind because we're going to see right away the same idea in another context. And that would be about Power Apps Grid Customizer Control. So there are a few special types of PCFs which we can use, and this one would be one of them. The Power Apps Grid, it's a control representing the next evolution of the Power Apps read-only grid control, allowing user to view, to open, and edit records from views and subgrids. This control will eventually replace all read-only and editable grids in model-driven apps. And what I'm very happy about, I can use it inside model-driven apps and even in Power Pages, and I have already now the infinite scrolling, the inline editing, I can define the colors, and even more. And there are a few features which are already announced, like grouping, aggregation, or nested grid, which I'm very much looking for. And when I'm talking about the customizer control, it's the option I have to specify the customizer control for this Power Apps Grid. And that would be a PCF. It's some kind of field PCF, which is hosting inside the Power Apps Grid. It's the same idea of cell render, which we can use for editor or just for rendering, which you saw in the Power Apps Grid. But the idea here is that I don't have to implement the whole grid. I let the hard work to the Power Apps Grid, and I only implement this tiny control for this column. So let's first see how it's working. So I go to the table and I choose there also the control that would be the Power Apps Grid. I have a lot of features there, like enabling the jump bar, the option set color, if it's editable or not. And when I have a look inside Dynamics, I can see this list. The colors are already shown. I have the option sets there. And if I've chosen to make it editable, I can edit right inside and also the options. But what if I want to change the look and feel of this technology code and I want to have it like my colorful option set from the form? I can implement that for PCF, and I have the update view, and the magic part is happening inside the init function here. I get the event name from the only property from the PCF, that's the event name, and using that, I'm able to register this render to the Power Apps Grid. And let's see how this kind of cell render looks like. It's pretty easy. So for the option set, I'm going to provide here a div. I use an icon from the Fluent UI, specify the color and the icon name and the formatted value, which I can get from the parameters from the render cell. And also, if a cell is clicked, I can change the row in edit mode. If it's an edit cell, I can use the same control from the Power Apps grid, which from the form, which we already saw. We have all the options provided, and in case the value change, I can provide the value to the row where I'm already. So I've uploaded this control, and you see here the name. So we have the publisher prefix, we have the namespace and the name of the control, and that's exactly what I'm gonna introduce here inside this configuration for the customizing control. And then I have to save and publish. And when I refresh now the grid, I see now the new control there. And I'm even able to use it as a dropdown and edit the values that will be saved inside the Power Apps grid. But we can use it also for some other use cases, like calculating some columns, in this case, a next appointment showing when there is a delay, and also some other use cases for retrieving related data. In this case, I've retrieved related users to this records, which wouldn't have been possible with a standard grid because that's a many-to-many relationship that cannot be included in one grid. So we can make a lot of magic there. But let us go back to the complete data set. If we have to implement that, we have the possibility to specify multiple data sets inside only one PCF. And when we use that inside model-driven apps, we have the possibility to choose there from a list of the views. That's much better than specifying some hard-coded fetch XML in some configuration files. The ribbon will apply for the first data set, but the second data set will provide me the data. And that's very nice in model-driven apps, but we can also use it, the same principle, so the same idea in the Canvas app and custom pages. An example of that, it's the Creator Kit. The details list from the Creator Kit, it's doing the same. It's using two data sets. You know about Creator Kit. It's a wonderful set of components for Canvas app and custom pages. And it's looking a lot like model-driven apps, and I like them a lot. And that's what I'm going to show you. But for that, I'll implement a custom page where I retrieve the data using the Dataverse search. Dataverse search allowed me to define more specific search strings using search operators like plus for and, or minus for except, or pipe for or. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So first of all, if you want to search in a search string for a view for everything about sample, but not for coffee, that won't gonna work. But if I do it that inside the Dataverse search, I get the records. And that's great. And I can jump to the records for account or a contact, for instance. But I wanted to have it only for one table. So let the user search with less clicks. So implemented that with the Dataverse search. I won't gonna do that here because that's another chapter, but there's an API which I've used and implemented the custom connector for Dataverse search. And every time I change the string in the input, I'm gonna provide that for the Dataverse search and specify that I want only the accounts, and I'm gonna save that in a variable. Inside the so I'll show the records using the Fluent details list. And all I have to do there is to define the fields. So that's the fields I want to show. I also provide the records, which I'll take from the variable provided by the Dataverse connector return values. And I have there this second data set, and there I provide the columns. So I provide a column name, display name, and the width. And now I'm ready to go. I'm able to search for a sample. And it works. I can see the records inside my custom page. But when you have to look to this fluent details list, this column data set, so the second data set, it's very important because and very interesting actually, because it provides me a way to define more complex, or I can customize more how this table have to look. But if I make an international project, I'm gonna have to translate this display name. I also have to define this width, and actually I've provided everything already inside the Dataverse search. So I thought that I could make a way to read that directly from the Dataverse search, which I did. Maybe it's possible to make it using low code, because there is a view I can retrieve that data, I can parse JSON, and I can loop through and maybe some other tricks to get a metadata. But for me, it was the point where it was getting too complicated. And what do you think I did? I did a PCF where I thought it was very easy to retrieve all that information. And for that, I've used another preview feature from the PCF where I can use the output objects and provide a schema for these output objects. I think it's a very powerful function. So I've implemented a PCF where I provided this table name. So I know which table I should retrieve the information. And as an output, I provide an object for the columns. And I can also provide the schema for the columns. That would be of type string, actually. And there is a definition inside the manifest. It's also something new where I say that the column schema is actually provided for the columns as a schema. The implementation, it's not hard. So I don't have much inside the init. It's actually nothing there. But inside the update view, each time the table name changes, I'm gonna retrieve the view. And when that's done, so I have the new columns, I'm gonna call the notify output change. This one will call the get outputs where I can provide the columns. And the schema for these columns, it's defined here. So I have an object with a value inside and an array containing call name, call display name, and call width. So let's see the implementation of this retrieve views. It's basically a fetch which I make on saved query. I retrieve there a column called layout JSON, and I filter so I can only get quick find query and return type code. I'm gonna filter on that too. So inside a PCF, as I have access to utilities, I can use the metadata and retrieve object type code. Using that, I can fetch the data. And after that, I have only one record where I get this attribute layout JSON. I parse that. And so I can provide now the name and the width. And since I'm in a PCF and I can use metadata, I'm gonna get the display name for that too. Now I can go inside a custom page and I'm gonna import this new PCF created Dataverse search columns, which I'm gonna drag on the form, but we won't see anything there. It's only for the calculation. And there I provide a table name to be account. And now I can go to the fluent details list and I'm gonna replace this table for the second data set with the result of my PCF. So that would be Dataverse search columns dot columns. That was the parameter defined in the PCF manifest. And you can see here the content. So I have dot value that was defined inside the schema. And there you can see I have the values for the column name. I have the column display name and the width, which are already defined inside my environment. So I can save and publish now. And if I refresh now the form, I can still work with a custom page. It's still filtering, and I have now the columns provided by the Dataverse information. If I change now my language to German and refresh the page, you can see that I have now the column names in German. So I haven't translated the custom page at all. It's everything provided from my PCF. Now, since I'm working with a PCF anyway, I've did a little more. I went to and defined another parameter called parent width. And there I'll provide the width of the details list. And that will give me the chance to calculate the rest of the place I have on the screen and divide it through columns so that the table will gonna take the whole screen. So you can see after refresh, I have the full screen there and so I'm covering the full width. And I can still work there with a filter. But if I change the size of the screen, you can see that the screen is now responsive. So that's actually what I think what the Fusion development is about, to make the part which makes sense more in ProDev only there, and to use the low code whatever it's possible, and to take the best of two words. So thank you very much, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and also you can see all the examples from today on my blog site and YouTube, and of course on my GitHub. Thank you very much.